Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson and Larry O'Connor. On the line now, we have Katie Pavlich, who wrote the definitive book on Fast and Furious. But lately, as I follow her on Twitter, I see she's talking a lot about the issue of guns, as the president will do later today, as he is surrounded by little children. Katie, first of all, I think congratulations are in order. I think I read yesterday that you are now officially a Fox News contributor. Is that correct?
I am. Thank you very much.
That is a very cool thing, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm excited.
All right, now, we're going to talk about guns today at the White House. The president is going to take action by executive order, we are told.
Yes, he is, and we're looking at not just one executive order, but up to 19 of them. And although the president has stayed pretty mum on what exactly those executive orders would entail, you can bet he's going to be calling on Congress today for the reinstatement of the assault weapons ban, the ban on, quote, high-capacity magazines, meaning anything that holds over 10 rounds, and universal background checks, to close what he likes to call the, quote, gun show loophole. And like you just mentioned, he'll be flanked with lots of children, because that's what the left is good at doing, is exploiting children and using a crisis to their best political motives. So get ready for a show at 11:45.
Well, I mean, are you offended by the use of children in this, as I am?
I am. I think it's disgusting. I'm not surprised. I mean, we saw President Obama do this with the health care legislation. He had a little boy leaning over him to make sure that he was in the shot. Liberals like to use children to their political advantage. They sure don't like to, protect them when it comes to actually making sure they make it out of the womb, but they're sure willing to use them once they need them for a political cause. I think it's horrible. But, they're PR geniuses, and this is why they win.
Katie Pavlich is she's the news editor at townhall.com. She's our guest now. And Katie, one of the, this is really the results of the Biden panel, the Blue Ribbon Commission, headed by Vice President Joe Biden. And one of the people sitting next to Joe Biden in many of those meetings was this guy.
And what we need to do is change the way in which people think about guns, especially young people, and make it something that's not cool, that it's not acceptable, it's not hip to carry a gun anymore. In the way in which we've changed our attitudes about cigarettes. When I was growing up, people smoked all the time. I mean, both my parents did. But over time, we changed the way in which people thought about smoking, and so now we have people who cower outside of buildings and kind of smoke in private and don't want to admit it.
So he's suggesting that gun owners need to cower, just like smokers now cower. That's, of course, your friend, Attorney General Eric Holder.
Yes, it's Eric Holder, the man who thinks we should brainwash people against guns, even though it's been a tradition in this country to own a gun and use them for sporting and to defend yourself for years. But yeah, he's not alone. I mean, he said that in the 90s. He's sticking around for President Obama. I've always said that President Obama needs Eric Holder, whether it's on voter fraud or gun control. He's sticking around for an infinite period of time. We haven't been told when he's leaving, obviously, to help President Obama push through his executive orders and to quote, do what they can through the Justice Department in terms of more gun control.
But,
and in terms of the shaming, I mean, we've seen this from the Journal News, right? They were treating people in New York who are handgun permit owners as sex offenders. And then you have the Attorney General of the United States saying that gun owners should cower as if they're doing something wrong when it's a Second Amendment right in the Constitution to do so.
Well, listen, Katie, you wrote the book on Fast and Furious. Of course, Eric Holder is the guy who sort of oversaw Fast and Furious, whether he admits it or not. The evidence suggests that he did, certainly the evidence you pointed out in your book. When they move for this assault weapons ban and condemn assault weapons, isn't there a huge opening to attack Eric Holder since he engineered sending assault weapons across the border illegally to Mexico? And who in the media is going to actually call them on it?
Right. This is the situation we are in, everyone. The person who will be in charge of enforcing new, quote, gun control measures and this new assault weapons ban, if they get it, is Eric Holder. Under the direction of President Obama, has stood by Eric Holder with full faith and confidence throughout the Fast and Furious scandal. His department sent Mexican cartels 2,500, quote, assault rifles, yet they don't want the law-abiding American citizens to have access to those kinds of firearms. Now, on top of it, not only is Eric Holder being put in charge here, but you have Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Chicago is more dangerous now than Afghanistan when it comes to Americans being killed. He'll be there today. Rahm Emanuel will. And he's been giving President Obama advice. So the three main people in charge here are Eric Holder, who has no problem with assault rifles going to Mexican cartels, but he sure has a problem with any law-abiding American citizen having one. President Obama, who is a radical when it comes to gun control. Everyone forgets that he's a radical. They act like he's middle of the road. He's not. And then you have Rahm Emanuel, who oversees a city that had more than 500 murders last year. And most of them were handguns. So what this comes down to is control rather than gun control for the American people. This is not about solving a problem.
You know, looking at Mexico, because you talked about Fast and Furious in Mexico. In Mexico right now, very strict gun control laws.
Mm-hmm.
For the average person living in Mexico, it's almost impossible. I mean, the barriers to owning a gun in Mexico legally are incredibly, incredibly high. And yet, there are guns all over Mexico, some of them sent by the United States, sadly, in Fast and Furious. But, I mean, the only people in Mexico who have guns are the criminals, and they've got a lot of guns, and they've got very high-powered weapons. So are we headed toward Mexico?
Well, that's the problem. And what sets, we've heard a lot about, the argument from the left, the Second Amendment is there to go hunting or to, use guns for sporting. It's not. It's to fight tyranny. And Mexico is a good example. And the reason why the United States sets itself apart for many other reasons, but especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, look around the world. In all these countries where there's a tyrant or some drug cartel activity that's ruining the economy in the country, the people can't defend themselves. In Mexico in particular, the corrupt government and police there have weapons, and the drug cartels have weapons. The people who don't have them are the people who are going about their business, getting killed in the crossfire. 63,000 people dead in Mexico since 2006 as a result of that war. 63,000. So like you said, gun control is working really well there to protect people from criminals. The criminals are sure paying attention to all those laws in Mexico.
Katie Pavlich, really quickly, you mentioned all of the handgun murders in a city like Chicago. It seems to me that if the president and the attorney general really wanted to protect children, innocents, from being killed, they would declare a war on gangs. Why politically are they not doing that?
Because the left doesn't like to focus on criminals. They like to focus on control. And they don't want to focus, like, even in the Sandy Hook case, which is why they're reacting to this. Have we heard a lot about Adam Lanza?
Nope.
No. We've heard a lot about guns and law-abiding citizens. They never want to focus on the actual person who is responsible for what happened. And it's the same situation in Chicago. It's the same situation with these mass killings. They never want to give credit to the law-abiding citizens who go through the training to get a concealed carry permit so the crime rates go down. Every state that has passed concealed carry has seen a overall drop in violent crime. That's a
pretty compelling statistic. You're right. Katie Pavlich, news editor at townhall.com, and again, congratulations on being named a Fox News contributor. That's a very cool thing. Thanks for joining us here on